We desire to know the best way to live. Restored Church exists to help people find hope and healing through a new life with Jesus. But what does life with Jesus look like on a day-to-day basis? In Proverbs, we see that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Trusting in God is the start of wise living. God directs our thoughts, feelings, and actions. We're living wisely when we make sure our heart is focused on God. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." When we pay attention to our heart and make sure we're focused on God, we are beginning to live the wise life. What does life with Jesus look like on a day-to-day basis? The wise life starts with trusting God and examining our heart to make sure we're focused on Him. In Proverbs, we see God's guide for wise living.
So, in college, it was my first Christmas break. And it was after finals. It was really snowy, and I wanted to go home for Christmas. I mean, it was my first semester away from home. I missed home. I wanted to be home. I packed up all my stuff from this semester and was ready to drive back. This was down in Illinois, driving back up here to Muskegon. And I went to start my minivan. I had a sweet Honda Odyssey. It was a very cool minivan, actually. I went through several in college. But I went to start my minivan, and boom, didn't start. And then I went and got somebody to help me try to jump it, and then hooked up to the jumper cables, etc., etc. Nothing. It was just a battery problem, and it was just donezo. And unfortunately, I was a college kid. I had recently spent all my money on Mountain Dew, Skittles, and video games, and I had none of it left over. And so I was talking about this in my fantasy football group chat. I was like, guys, I'm in a real bad situation here. And I wasn't asking for help in any way. I was just like saying, I don't even know what to do, guys. And then one guy in my fantasy football league, and he told me, like, you don't tell anyone I'm not doing this to get credit or whatever. He Venmo'd me the money to go buy a new car battery so that way I could start my minivan to go home for Christmas break. And I was like, wow, that is so nice of you. You did not have to do that, but it was awesome. I mean, I was an 18-year-old kid that had no idea what he was doing. But the generosity that this guy showed me was amazing in that moment. When I didn't know what I would do, his generosity came forth in a really crucial time for me. And that's what we're talking about today, is generosity. That's what we're looking at from the book of Proverbs. If you weren't here when I did announcements, my name is Simon. I volunteer here, and I'm especially glad that you're here at Restored Church. And we're going to look into the book of Proverbs today on generosity. And so whenever I am going to teach a sermon, I always ask my wife, like, hey, what do you think I should say? And she was like, and she goes, well, what's the topic? And I was like, well, Elizabeth, it's on generosity. And she goes, oh, just tell them to be generous. And so my first point here is to be generous. And after you walk away after this sermon today, I hope that you are more generous after the sermon than you were before the sermon. That is the point. That's the purpose of why I'm sharing what I'm going to share with you guys. And the main verse that we're looking at is Proverbs 11, 24 and 25. So let me read that for you. One man gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. And so that's going to be our main verse. We're going to dissect that more. But before we jump into that, I'd like to review all the weeks that we've done through Proverbs so far. So the theme verse is Proverbs 1:7, and here it is. And it says, oh, we're skipping the main verse. That's okay. The main verse is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so, basically, if you want to be wise, if you want to be smart, if you want to be knowledgeable, follow the wisdom of God. If you want to be a fool, and actually in the book of Proverbs, it also uses the word stupid. And so I'm not trying to be aggressive. That's just what Proverbs says. If you want to be a fool, if you want to be stupid, despise wisdom and instruction. Don't listen to people. Don't listen to the Bible. Just if you want to be stupid, that's on you. You can do that. That's the main verse here in Proverbs. And then the whole book just goes advice after advice after advice on wise living. And so we're going to run through each week We have 4 weeks. This is week number 5. So week number 1, we talked about friends. And the main verse was, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. And the main idea that Justin talked about that week was surround yourself with people that you want to be like. If you surround yourself with people who are going in the same direction as you, then you will become like that. If you surround yourself with your most core group of people that are not headed in a good direction, well, where do you think you're going to go? Not in a good direction. So the main idea was to your closest inner group be people that are going the same place as you. Week number 2, anger. And this was the main verse. An angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins. Again, the idea here was not that the emotion of anger is necessarily sinful. It's just when it causes you to not be in control anymore, when you're hot-tempered, you stir up conflict because of it, then you will commit sins. And the whole idea was to not be controlled by your anger, yet be controlled by Jesus. Week number 3 was contentment. Proverbs 23:5. Cast a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. And the idea here was that you want your life to not be based on the stuff you can collect or the stuff you can achieve. It is based solely on what we have in Jesus. And when you have that, you have true contentment. And that was the idea of that week. Week 4, this was last week, we talked about being a neighbor. The main verse was, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is your power to act. We're actually going to revisit that one today. But then verse 28, do not say to your neighbor, come back tomorrow and I'll give it to you, when you already have it with you. Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. The idea in verse 28 was that when you have something, it could be a physical thing, it could be a piece of knowledge or some time or whatever it is. If you have something to help your neighbor, help your neighbor. They live next door, help them out. And now we are on to generosity. And so we're going to throw that main verse back up on there, Proverbs 11:24 and 25. One man gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous man will prosper, but he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. When I first read this preparing for today, I was most interested in a generous person will prosper. Because, I mean, nobody in here is like, I don't want to prosper. No, we want to prosper, right? That makes sense. And so I wanted to know what that truly meant. What does it mean to prosper? So I looked up the original word. This is Old Testament, so it was Hebrew. And the word is actually dashin. In the most literal translation, like if there was no touch to the translation, just straight up literal, it means to become greasy or to be made fat. So Simon's translation of Proverbs 11:25 is a generous man will become greasy fat, which is actually a good thing for how much Scribs pizza I eat. So this is actually a good thing. But obviously, they don't mean that. If you look deeper, if you look at the cultural context to what it was really getting at, was in that time, someone who would be made greasy fat would be seen as someone that had what they needed. Because if you did not have what you needed, you could be starving and thinning out. You know what I'm saying? And so when they would think about this or say that, a better understanding of it is a generous man has everything that he needs. Which then leads to the next obvious question is, what does someone truly need? What is everything you need? And then when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about life in its most simplest form, an infant, a baby, which obviously, if you guys know me, some of you don't, I have a baby. I know I've never talked to you guys about her ever before. I'm not really into that. Just kidding. I talk about her constantly. Elaine's awesome. So I have this baby at home, right? And what she needs is she needs like a diaper change. She needs to eat. She needs to be cuddled. If you can do those 3 things, Elaine's going to be okay. And Elaine needs those things from her parents. If me and Elizabeth were in the house and we just set Elaine down, we're like, all right, you're on your own, she would have a pretty severe problem. She literally is hopeless without us. without the ones that created her, without the ones that brought her into the world, she would be completely hopeless from getting everything that she needs. But because we are good parents, we are able to help her out. And you can tell if you have seen her, like right before she gets hungry or right before she gets tired, she gets super cranky. Things are not right between me and Elaine when she gets super cranky with tired. Things are not right between Elizabeth and her when she gets super hungry. And that, I think, is getting at the core of our needs as well, to be right with the ones that created us. Now, the analogy does break down because I'm not just talking about your biological parents. In a grander scheme of things, God, the creator of all, is the one who gave us life. And when we are not right with our creator, we are like Elaine when she's hungry and when she's tired. We're going to be freaking out and crying. Okay, that is a severe problem. But we need to be right with our creator, just like Elaine needs to be right with me and Elizabeth in order to have everything that she needs. Everything we need is to be right with our creator. Yet that doesn't always happen. You know this as good as I do, that there is things in this world that make us feel or think or believe that we are not right with God. We mess up and do something stupid that we know is wrong. And maybe we even do it again and again and again. And that separates us from God. Maybe there's things that happen to you from other people, and you just see this and you're like, this world is not right. We're not right with our creator. Whatever the case is, we've all seen this. But that's not how it started. When God created the planet originally, we were right with our creator. We were right with creation. Yet we sinned, we all sinned, we rebelled, we fell short, and we created a big problem between us and God. And for the analogy's sake, we are screaming and crying and hungry. Yet, God was able to do something about it. Just like we are able to do something about Elaine's hunger and Elaine's tiredness, God is able to do something for me and for you when we are not right with him. He sent Jesus to live the perfect life that I could never live. God sent Jesus to die the death on our behalf that I deserved. God sent Jesus to rise from the dead to create life now and forever. And when we place our faith in him, we are finally right with our creator. And once we are right with our creator, everything else is on the table. We are then able to be generous because we have everything we could ever need. Jesus lived, died, and was risen for me, and because of that, I'm right with my creator. I have everything I need, and that is the foundation that I can now walk on, I can now live with, and I can now be generous because I have everything I could ever need. Proverbs 13:25 says this: "The righteous eat to their heart's content, but the stomach of the wicked goes hungry." Now, the writer of these Proverbs is continuing on in this theme, this analogy with like the hunger and the what you actually need soul-wise when he says heart's content. Basically, what he's saying here is the righteous are satisfied to their soul's content. And we become righteous when we place our faith in Jesus. His righteousness is placed on us, and we have everything we need, and we are full to our soul's content. When we have that, we are then able to build a house of generosity on this. And now when we talk about generosity, you can be generous in different ways. The most common one that I've heard in churches for years and years and years is your time, treasures, and talents. And so you can be generous with the time that you have. You can be generous with treasures, meaning your money, and your talent, what you're able to do. And I know for a fact that it can be awkward when a church talks about giving money-wise. And so in order to get around that, we kind of say like, oh, it's also about your time and your talents, which is 100% true. But at the same time, it is also about our money. And that's like, you can't just be ashamed to say that. And I remember, so there was, when we were in Illinois, when me and Elizabeth lived in Illinois for 6 years, there was somebody who I came across, and they were talking about their church experience. That's people tend to do that with me. But she was like complaining and saying, I'm going to leave my church. It just seems like all the time they're just begging for money. They just are in my pockets. They're da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's all they care about. That's all they talk about. And I was like, oh, I am so sorry that that was your experience with that church. Come to my church. We're not like that. And I bet you cannot guess what the sermon was on the day that she finally came to church. It was on giving. Can you believe that? I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. She never came back. It was so unfortunate. But I can also see why it gets uncomfortable sometimes, especially when now this isn't the case with Restore, but when it's the pastor saying it who has more skin in the game, you could be like, wait a second. He's just saying that because he can make money off of this church. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but that can be a skeptical thing. I think people in today's culture think that they could say that. But before I talk more about this, I just want you to know I gained $0 from Restore Church. In fact, I lose money here at Restore Church. But and also, Justin said this is not a commission-based sermon. So I just wanted to get all that awkwardness and uncomfortableness out of the way before we dive into discussing this further. So check out Proverbs 3, verse 9. And here's what it says. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. And so there's an idea throughout the Old Testament. It's more common. The New Testament does back it up entirely. The idea of first fruits. And so the idea of the first fruits would be a farmer at the time. You know, he'd have his whole crop, whether that's, I don't know, wheat, or let's just say wheat. That's the easiest example. And then he would give the first 10% of anything that he made on the farm to God, to the temple, to what that would have been their version of their church at the time. That's what they would have done. They would have given their first fruits to God. And so that is I'm guessing, unless maybe some of you actually do own a farm, maybe you're farmers. I'm not. But for us, it would be the money that we have income from our work would be the idea here. And I get also that it is not easy if you hadn't grown up thinking about it and doing it. And so, that being said, we're going to talk about the giving pathway here at Restored Church, the plan to go from not giving anything to then becoming a regular tither. And this was particularly interesting with me in my life because my wife did not grow up in a Christian household. I did grow up in a Christian household. So much so that when I was a kid, we would get, I believe it was a monthly allowance of $10, which, I mean, when I got the $10, I was like, oh my goodness, that's so cool. But when I would get the $10, we had to, the very first thing that we did in my family was we would take $1 from it, 10%, then we would bring it to church and put it in the offering. It was non-negotiable. You had no option. That was the only thing you did, and that's just how I was raised. My wife, on the other hand, is a completely foreign concept to be giving 10% of your income to a church. Why would you do that? And so when we started, when we got married in 20-something, I should really remember the year. It's in July 21st, I know that. But we got married, and then we combined finances. And so how we handled it was we started with just the automatic $5 a week would go to our church. At the time, it was called Arlington Countryside Church, which is funny because it wasn't in the countryside at all. It was like Chicago suburbs, but when the church started, it was the countryside. So we started with just $5 a week. Now, that is not tithing because that's not 10% unless we were making $50 a week. And I was a youth pastor at the time, so I was close to that. Barely more than $50 a week. No, that's just a joke. But then what we did was over time, we slowly, as we were able, we would add $5 to our recurring giving, and then it would be $10. And then we would add $5, and we would add $5 as we felt comfortable together on the same page, on the same front. We worked our way up until we were tithing to our church. And so, if you look at, I believe we have a slide for that, Dallas, right? So the giving process that we use at Restored Church, goes like this. So you could be anywhere on this spectrum. Say that you have never given a dime to Restore Church, but it's your church home. I wanted to say this. If you're a guest, this is not me saying that as a guest you're supposed to give to Restore Church. If you call Restore Church home, if this is your church family, that is what you're called to do. So it would be first time. Literally even $1. That is a first time gift towards Restore Church. And then from there, you can go on our website, you can go on whatever, and you can make it automatic and intentional. Like I was saying, start with $5. And then you work your way up until you are tithing, which would be 10% of your income. And then after that, then you can give to our different kind of things that we do, our different ways that we're generous with others. Then that would be above tithing, and you would be at what we would call generous. And this is a difficult ask, but the truth and the reality of it is that Restore Church exists because of people's giving. It is crucial, and Restore Church's mission is crucial. We exist to help people find hope and healing in Jesus. That is a cause worth giving to. Jesus, like we talked about earlier, is the only way that we are right with our Creator, and we want more people to experience that. It is very important, very vital that we do that. And for Restore Church to exist and do that, there has to be monetary funds to make it all happen. It doesn't just come out of thin air. And so that is important for Restore Church. But I know that we're still wondering, but what does it do for me? And giving charitably actually is better for you as well. The next verse in Proverbs, so it's Proverbs 3:9, and now we're going to add verse 10 on there. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. What the writer here is saying is that when you give your first fruits to God, you will benefit from it. And now, I'm not Joel Osteen saying that if you give $5.99 a month and then all of a sudden you'll be a billionaire. That's not at all what we're saying. That's not the message we're saying. That's not what the Bible says in any way. But I do think it is true that charitable giving does increase your ability to handle money. And actually, statistically, that is true. People who give charitably have more money than people that don't here in America today. And now you can think, why is that? There has to be a reason. Is it just because they have more so they can give more? That's actually not the case. It's about percentages. It's not about if somebody makes $400,000 and somebody makes $40,000 a year. It's about the percentage that they give. And also, in this study that I was reading, somebody can be making that absurd kind of money and they are in wild debt and they have no control over their money whatsoever, versus someone who makes $25,000 or whatever that actually is in control of their money. The 2 weeks ago when I was studying for this sermon, I was researching the average household debt in America. And 2 weeks ago, it was $105,000 of consumer debt. That's insane. And that was 2 weeks ago. It's probably higher now. It's probably 110 because it just keeps going. But the fact of the matter is, the income is irrelevant. The income amount does not show that someone's in control of their money. If someone is out of control with their money when they get $10 of an allowance as a kid, they're going to be out of control with their money when they're making an adult salary. So one thing that charitable giving does when you make it automatic, intentional, is that it forces you to be in control of your money. If you were forced to give away the first 10% of your crops, yeah, you'd be a lot more serious about the crops that you have. You would be able to be in control of it. You'd be a lot wiser about it if you're giving away the first 10% of your crops. And so I think it's important to say that giving money, this is a point on the screen, if you could flip to that, Dallas. Giving money will lead to better control of your money. When you are forced to give that initial 10%, you're going to be like, well, shoot, I better get my ducks in a row. Because think about it, if you're currently spending over 100% of your budget because you're going further into debt, it's just out of control. To be able to give the 10%, you start gaining control of your money. And not just you will gain control of your money, giving money will lead to greater satisfaction with your money. there's over and over and over and over again, studies have shown, you've talked to people that hoard their money, they view it as something to just be kept, something to be hoarded, something to have. People who are invested in charitable giving, they view money as something to be used to help people, used for others' benefits. So it is important to give to Restore Church, but also with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors. Be generous with your money. Don't view money as just something to be hoarded or to be kept. View money as something to be used for the benefit of society, to the benefit of others. Giving money will lead to better control of your money, and giving money will lead to greater satisfaction with your money. And it's also not only about money. It is also about your actions and how you live. So we're going to flip to that other Proverbs. We actually addressed it last week, Proverbs 3:27. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. Last week we talked about this specifically with neighbors, but guess who it also applies to? Everybody. When you have the power to act good on someone else's behalf, do it. It does not only have to be with money. You can be generous with your actions. Last winter, just this previous one, there was a day where on Norton Shores Informed, somebody posted that their son drove their minivan into their front yard in the snow, and then they couldn't get it out. It was stuck. And so Justin called me up, and he was like, hey, Simon, someone's stuck in their front yard of their minivan. You have trucks and ropes. Can you come help? Sure, of course. So me and Justin went over there. I didn't know the person at all. But we went over and we tugged their minivan out of their snow in their front yard. It didn't cost money, but we were generous with our actions, and we made a difference in that person's life. Now, maybe you don't have trucks and ropes to pull people out of their front yards when their son drives into it in the snow. That's such a boneheaded move. But when you do have the power to be generous with your actions, do it. You have to just take action and do it. And when you're that kind of person, you will have greater satisfaction out of your life when you are generous with your money and with your actions. And so that is, I guess, the whole point of what we're reading in Proverbs today. Like Elizabeth wanted me to tell you guys, be generous. When you go out into your life this week, be more generous than you were before you came here. I'm going to pray for us, and then we are going to head into communion. Father, thank you that you're a generous God. Thank you that you're generous with your love for us. And thank you that you've given us everything we could ever need in your Son, Jesus. I pray for all of Restore Church that we will be a generous people. I pray that we will give freely with our actions and with our money. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.